United Nations, Her Excellency Maria Theophili will receive the prize on her behalf. I now invite the Deputy Secretary General, Her Excellency Amina Mohammed, to join me in presenting the Nelson Rohilya Mandela Prize to the 2020 laureates. On behalf of the Secretary General of the United Nations, His Excellency Antonio Guterres, to the Permanent Representative of Greece, Her Excellency Maria Theophili, receiving it on behalf of Mrs. Mariana Vardinoyan, and to His Excellency Morisanda Kouyaté, Minister of Foreign Affairs of the Republic of Guinea. I thank the Deputy Secretary General for presenting the prizes to the laureates on behalf of the Secretary General. I congratulate Mrs. Mariana Vardinoyan and His Excellency Morisanda Kouyaté, the laureates of the United Nations 2020 Nelson Rohilya Mandela Prize. I now invite Mrs. Mariana Vardinoyan of Greece, Goodwill Ambassador of UNESCO, President of Elpida Hope Association of Friends of Children with Cancer, and laureate of the United Nations 2020 Nelson Rohilya Mandela Prize, to make a statement via video conferencing.
Seguimos. Pues primero, Your Excellency, Mr. President of the United Nations General Assembly, Your Excellency, Ms. Deputy Secretary General, Excellencies, in the challenging times we are living in, core values as peace, social justice, health, education, but also the gift of life itself, unfortunately, cannot be taken for granted. The fight for protecting human rights is more important than ever, and symbols who dedicate their lives in the protection of human rights, like Nelson Mandela did, became the shining light to guide our paths. This is the reason why it is a great honor for me to join my voice with the voice of the United Nations on this symbolic day in order to pay tribute to the life, work, and ideals of Nelson Mandela. I feel truly blessed that my action, life path, and beliefs brought me close to this legend. I humbly receive today this distinction that bears his name and carries all the values and ideals of his life. This is for me a great honor, but also a great commitment. I'm feeling deeply moved, and I would like to express my warmest thanks and gratitude to the United Nations for this immense honor, and also warmly congratulate Dr. Morisanda Kouyaté. This highly significant distinction is a recognition for my fight against childhood cancer and my foundation's work for the defense of human rights in education and society. A true honor for me, but also for my home country, Greece, and the Greek people who have supported my work and humanitarian efforts. This award belongs to the thousands of children that became our source of strength throughout our struggles against childhood cancer for more than 30 years. Children from Greece, Balkans, Mediterranean, Africa, and beyond are our everyday heroes. And our pediatric oncology hospital in Athens, one of the most advanced hospitals in Europe, in our significant accomplishment towards our vision for a world without borders in children's health. In order to protect children's health, our hospital is always ready to respond to any international call for help, like we recently did for the children with cancer from Ukraine. The United Nations Development Goals, as well as UNESCO's priorities for education, peace, human rights, cultural heritage, and dialogue among civilizations, are the cornerstones of our foundation for supporting vulnerable groups like as refugees and homeless people, and also for bringing human rights education in the Greek schools to provide students with noble examples and new opportunities. In my 35 years of action, I have always tried to pay service to humanity, to make a difference in other people's life, like Mandela in his wise words said. Nelson Mandela International Day 2022 is a great opportunity for the world to receive an ecumenical message for peace and international cooperation from the heart of the United Nations. Nelson Mandela's timeless legacy and the global theme of Nelson Mandela Day 2022, do what we can with what we have, wherever we are, remind us that even through small acts of kindness, solidarity, and giving, standing by the weakest members of our society, we can all try to make our world a better place. Nelson Mandela changed the human history, changed the human mind and the lives of millions of people. Let the power of his soul, his visions, and his values guide our steps. We owe it to the memory of this great advocate for human rights, but we also owe it to our children, to our civilization, to our fellow humans, and to life itself. Thank you.
I thank Mrs. Mariana Vardinianis for her statement. I now give the floor to His Excellency Morisanda Kouete, Minister of Foreign Affairs of the Republic of Guinea and Laureate of the United Nations Nelson Rolihlahla Mandela Prize, to make a statement.
Excellence, Monsieur Abdullah Shahid, Président de l'Assemblée générale des Nations unies, Excellence Madame Amina Mohamed, Secrétaire générale adjointe des Nations unies, Excellence Monsieur Mondli Gungubele, Ministre de la Présidence de la République de l'Afrique du Sud, Excellences, Mesdames et Messieurs les représentants des groupes régionaux, Excellences, Mesdames et Messieurs les ambassadeurs, Monsieur Eric Adams, maire de la ville de New York, Prince Harry et Madame, Duc de Sussex, chère Madame Mariana Vardinianis, honorables invités, Mesdames et Messieurs.
General Assembly of the United Nations, Your Excellency Amina Mohamed, Deputy Secretary General of the United Nations, Your Excellency Mr. Mondli Gungubale, Minister of the Presidency of the Republic of South Africa, distinguished representatives of regional groups, distinguished ambassadors, Mr. Eric Adams, Mayor of the City of New York, Prince Harry, the Duke of Sussex, dear Ms. Mariana Vardenoyanis, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, allow me first and foremost to express on my own behalf, on behalf of my family and on behalf of my country, the Republic of Guinea, my sincere and deep gratitude to the United Nations, our common organization, for having awarded me the very prestigious Nelson Mandela Prize in 2020. Thank you as well for inviting me this 18th of July, 2022, to receive the prize in person and to address the entire world on this day of celebration of International Nelson Mandela Day. Excellencies, Your Excellency, Mr. President, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, my personal adventure began one evening. It was in the year 1983. I was in Tougué, a modest prefecture of Guinea. I was a young doctor, a hospital director, one full of enthusiasm. I received in the emergency room two twins, Hassanatu and Hussein-Natu. They were 12 years old, and they had just been circumcised, mutilated, and they suffered extensive bleeding, which led to them losing their lives, despite the efforts of all of the staff, the medical staff. Thus began my rebellion and my struggle against female genital mutilation, because I felt that the death of these two innocent girls was the same as that of my own daughters. It is therefore to these two twins who departed too soon, to my parents, above all my mother Hadia Saran Condé, and to my wonderful family, to the women of Guinea, of Curaçao, of Africa, and the world, to whom I dedicate this prize. The 18th of July is now written in letters of light in the history of humanity. For this date commemorates a towering human figure, an exceptional man who taught the entire world lessons of peace, tolerance, and the love of others. I am referring to Nelson Rolihlahla Mandela. I remember when I was a young student in school, every Saturday we would make a chant. We would say, "Free Mandela, free Mandela, free Mandela," today. So today, it's very emotional for me to carry the name of this amazing historic man. More than ever, we need Nelson Mandela. We need the spirit of Mandela. For we are confronted with a world that has strayed into upheaval and that has created new threats to its own existence. Indeed, ladies and gentlemen, there is gender inequality with its consequences, namely violence against women and girls, including female genital mutilation and child marriage. There's an increasingly deep gap between the rich and the poor. There is the destruction of the ozone layer with its drastic consequences on the climate. There are wars, terrorism, hunger, water shortages. All these continue to shake our planet. We can check these scourges with the spirit of Mandela. This year, we are celebrating this day under the following theme: do what you can with what you have wherever you are. Ladies and gentlemen, today, what I can do, beyond defending the rights of women and children, is to participate with all of my strength and with conviction through this prestigious prize to contribute to rebuilding my country, the Republic of Guinea, which is recovering from a serious wound dealt to its constitutional order. What I have today is my responsibility as Minister of Foreign Affairs, International Cooperation, African Integration, and Guineans Abroad, which is conferred upon me by His Excellency Colonel Mamadi Doumbouya, the President of the Transition Head of State and Commander-in-Chief of the Armies of the Republic of Guinea. President, distinguished guests, it is in the spirit of Mandela that in Guinea the President initiated national assemblies This is a framework for cooperation and inclusive dialogue. In this context, he appealed to Guineans to speak with one another and to forgive one another. That's why here, from this roof of the world, I am sounding a clarion call for responsibility, a call for understanding and discernment, a call to sub-regional, regional, and international organizations, and to all countries represented here, to the Republic of Guinea in its fight against corruption. It so sorely needs such support. Nelson Rolihlahla Mandela Madiba. I'm proud to carry your name. I may never ever do, as much as you, but throughout my life and with all my strength, I will strive to emulate you, Mandela. Long live international cooperation. Long live the United Nations. Thank you.
I thank Dr. Morrison Kouyaté for his statement. I now give the floor to the Deputy Secretary General of the United Nations, Her Excellency Amina Mohammed, to make a statement on behalf of the Secretary General.
Excellencies, the 2020 prize laureates, the Duke and Duchess of Sussex, ladies and gentlemen, I'm really pleased to be with you today and to represent the Secretary General and deliver his remarks on his behalf as we celebrate Nelson Mandela International Day. And his message is, today the world honors a giant of our time, a leader of unparalleled courage and towering achievement, and a man of quiet dignity and deep humanity. Nelson Mandela was a healer of communities and a mentor to generations. He remains a moral compass and a reference to us all. Madiba walked the path to freedom and dignity with steely determination and with compassion and love. He showed that each and every one of us has the ability and responsibility to build a better future for all. Our world today is marred by war, overwhelmed by emergencies, blighted by racism, discrimination, poverty and inequalities, and threatened by climate disaster. Let us find hope in Nelson Mandela's example and inspiration in his vision. Today and every day, let us honor Nelson Mandela's legacy by taking action, by speaking out against hate and standing up for human rights, by embracing our common humanity, rich in diversity, equal in dignity, united in solidarity, and by together making our world more just, compassionate, prosperous, and sustainable for all. Excellencies, this was the message of the Secretary General. Dear friends, what an amazing feeling it is, after virtual commemorations over the past 2 years, that we can be together in person to pay tribute in this august General Assembly Hall, the very place Madiba spoke to us after his long walk to freedom. On a personal note, Madiba has been an inspiration for me ever since I was a young child in Nigeria trying to find my path. Since then, Mama Grassa and Selo Hatang, through the Nelson Mandela Foundation, keep the fire under our feet on the many issues that Nelson Mandela Madiba embodied. I've taken to heart his profound lesson that we all have the ability and responsibility to take action, that there is no us and them. We are in this together, carrying a shared responsibility to preserve our common home and stand in solidarity with one another. All over the world, there are people who follow in Madiba's footsteps with that same stubborn optimism that defined him. I would like to acknowledge two of those such people today that we were able and honored to give the laureates of the 2020 Nelson Mandela Prize. Ms. Mariana Vardinoyannis of Greece and her decades-long fight against childhood cancer, and Dr. Morrison Kouyaté of Guinea for his quest to end female genital mutilation. COVID restrictions have not allowed one of our colleagues to travel to New York, but we're really pleased to hear the statement of Morrison Kouyaté today, and we congratulate you both. The Nelson Mandela Prize is guided by the purpose and principles of our United Nations and the promise of the ideals that were championed by Madiba. We work towards his vision of peace, dignity, equality on a healthy planet, every day, everywhere, ensuring that we leave no one behind. Our SDG advocate, representing persons with disabilities, or I would like to say special abilities, is from South Africa, and Eddie Ndopu, we welcome you into these halls today as you continue to inspire us. Our best tribute to Madiba is to realize the promise of the Sustainable Development Goals, to stand in solidarity against hate, and to work for peace and prosperity and human rights for all on Mandela Day and every day. In Madiba's wise words, it only seems impossible until it is done. Thank you for your attention.
I thank the Deputy Secretary General for her statement. I now give the floor to His Excellency Mondil Gungubele, Minister in the Presidency of the Republic of South Africa, to make a statement.
Your Excellency, Mr. Abdullah Shahid, President of the General Assembly, Your Excellency, Ms. Amina J. Mohammed, Deputy Secretary General of the United Nations, the Duke and the Duchess of Sussex, Prince Harry, and Ms. Meghan Markle, the United Nations Nelson Mandela Prize to the 2020 laureates, His Excellency, Dr. Mursand Kuyate, and also Minister of Foreign Affairs of Guinea, and Ms. Mariana Vadionis of Greece. Mr. Eric Adams, the Mayor of New York, distinguished Excellencies, dear colleagues and friends, it is a matter of great privilege for me to address this august gathering on behalf of the Government of the Republic of South Africa and His Excellency President Cyril Ramaphosa to mark the Nelson Mandela International Day in honor of the lifelong work of our late beloved global icon and first President of our Democratic Republic, Nelson Rolihlahla Mandela, who was also born on this historic day. The South African government shall never take for granted the landmark decision of the United Nations taken in November 2009 to officially declare 18th of July as a Mandela Day. Mr. President, the chosen theme for this year's Mandela Day, as issued by the Nelson Mandela Foundation, is about creating awareness of interactions between food security and climate change. Crucially, the selected tagline for this year's edition is "Do what you can with what you have, wherever you are." The lifelong work of Nelson Mandela in service of justice causes for the benefit of humanity is a testament that everyone can play their role for the greater good with what they have in their respective societies and communities. Nelson Mandela dedicated 67 years of the best years of his life to the service of others, albeit in very difficult conditions, including 27 years of imprisonment. The unprecedented global challenges currently confronting humanity and the planet we share require that the international community acts in harmony, true solidarity and common purpose. As we grapple with peace and security challenges, human rights atrocities, climate disaster, COVID-19 recovery, addressing food security and hunger, bridging the economic and gender inequality, as well as combating the stubborn demon of racial intolerance and discrimination, we can derive courage from the power of example displayed by our beloved Madiba, that we can make the impossible to be possible, even though the odds may seem stacked against us. Mr. President, in Swahili proverb teaches us that a boat doesn't go forward if each one is rowing their way. This marks 8 years before 2030, which is our agreed target for achieving the 17 Sustainable Development Goals. As we seek to restore momentum disrupted by the outbreak of COVID-19, it goes without saying that if we're now in different directions, we would only move around in circles and not reach our intended destination on time. To assess the weight of the Herculean task before us regarding the implementation of SDGs, I wish to isolate those SDGs that talk to the theme of this year's Mandela, namely Goal 2, on ending hunger, achieving food security, and improve nutrition, and promote sustainable agriculture, and Goal 13, on taking urgent action to combat climate change and its impacts. On Goal 2, the number of people going hungry is on the rise, a situation exacerbated by skyrocketing food prices, even for the most basic goods such as sugar, vegetable oils, dairy products, wheat and cereals. The byproduct of this crisis has been outbreaks of civil unrest, conflict over scarce resources, and widespread malnutrition among children. Let us use our collective wisdom as the international community to address objectively these food security challenges. We note the efforts of the United Nations in this regard. Our Goal 13, the consequences of climate disaster, are no longer in the confines of scientific academic journals, but are now a lived reality. The extreme weather condition characterized by rising sea levels, increased heat waves, droughts, and flood caused by climate change are devastating our planet and impact on livelihoods of people all over the world, particularly the poor. For the sake of the future generation, we urgently need to adhere to our great international commitments to guarantee food security as well as ensure that we limit global warming to 1.5 degrees Celsius. This we can achieve if we all row in the same direction as the wisdom in the Swahili proverb urges us to do if we want meaningful results. We will not be able to achieve our noble objectives without peace in the world. Nelson Mandela would have urged the international community during this period to invest more in diplomacy, mediation, and peaceful resolution of all conflicts. He would have abhorred any attempts to prolong instead of stopping conflict. It is disheartening to know that, as the United Nations General Secretary has reminded us, the world today faces more violent conflicts than at any period in the past 7 decades, and 2 billion people live in conflict-ridden areas. Mr. President, as I conclude, I wish to remind this august gathering that Nelson Mandela's life was synonymous with painful struggle but never relented in the face of adversity. Rather, he understood that making the world a better place than you had found it was very noble and gratifying endeavor. Most importantly, Nelson Mandela accepted that committing yourself to struggle was a lifelong obligation when he said, I quote, "After climbing a great hill, one only finds that there are many more hills to climb." I thank you.
I thank the Minister in the Presidency of the Republic of South Africa for his statement. I now give the floor to Mr. Eric Adams, Mayor of the City of New York, to make a statement.
Thank you, Mr. President, Deputy Secretary General, Undersecretary General, Excellencies, and honored guests. Today we celebrate the life and legacy of Nelson Mandela. I also want to congratulate the Nelson Mandela Prize laureates. This day is so important because today many people around the globe are in dark places. They don't see a future for themselves, their families, or our planet. They're serving a life sentence of despair and hopelessness. I have been to the Robben Island prison where Nelson Mandela was imprisoned for 27 years. That small cell where he endured so much was a powerful sight. While he was in jail, he knew that where he was not who he was. And Nelson Mandela went on to become the president of the country that imprisoned him. As he himself once said, to be free is not merely to cast off one's chains, but to live in a way that respects and enhances the freedom of others. The freedom of others is what we must address now. The freedom to live a long and healthy life on this green and glorious earth. The freedom to see all the world's children and grandchildren flourish, as well as generations to come. The freedom from wars, conquest, and brutal inequality. The freedom from the racism and bigotry in which so many of these crimes are committed. The freedom to live, work, and love in our own way, according to our own choice. Freedom from want and freedom from fear. This world, a world that celebrates the human spirit instead of crushing it in the name of power and impossible. But no leader, however gifted or inspiring, can change the world alone. The people must be mobilized and political institutions must respond. We as leaders cannot fall back on excuses and inertia when the people demand change. We must be inspired by the courage of Nelson Mandela or Madiba, his given name. History cannot erase the 27 years he sacrificed in the name of freedom. But his example reminds us that the darkest times cannot quench our spirit or dim our hopes. My mother once said to me, if you find yourself in a dark place, you make the determination if this dark place is a burial or a planting. These dark times can and must be a planting. The ongoing crises of COVID, war, and crime have imprisoned us in our own Robben Island prisons. But these are temporary conditions. They're not life sentences. My own personal story is a reflection of that. I was dyslexic and denied support services as a child. I was arrested as a youth and felt rejected as a person. But I knew it was not the end, not a burial. And today I stand before you energized by all that I have endured on my journey too. Each of us must challenge the humanistic spirit of fortitude and forgiveness as we rise through the challenges of our time. That Mandela-like energy will allow us to turn our pain into purpose. It will allow us to turn those dark places into the plantings we need to assure a harvest of hope, equity, and peace. This planting means ending global poverty through sharing our worldwide wealth. It means giving Mother Earth the love she deserves by protecting our environment. It means affluent countries must share vaccines for all to help the spread of COVID-19. It means ending abuses against women and children across the globe. These tasks will not be easy. This is something we must focus on. The path is not straight. Victory is not assured. But hidden in the shadows of Mandela's story is our pathway forward. We must be courageous enough to examine the directions we are going and commit to doing the right thing. We must say to those who believe where they are is who they are, that they are all right, things can change. And that change cannot wait. You are husbands, wives, children, and members of this great race we call the human race. The work of planting must begin now with us. We must make sure the harvest feeds the hopes and dreams of all in the years to come. And New York City is ready to work with the world to make this future a reality. Long live the spirit of Madiba. Thank you.
I thank the Mayor of the City of New York for his statement. I now invite Prince Harry, the Duke of Sussex, who will deliver a keynote statement.
Good morning, everybody, and thank you to the President of the General Assembly, His Excellency Mr. Abdullah Shahid, for the introduction. And thank you to the Nelson Mandela Foundation for inviting me to speak on this day of all days. And thank you to Secretary General Guterres and the United Nations, whose promise reflects Mandela's vision of a freer, more peaceful world, for hosting us today. It is an honor to join you all on Nelson Mandela International Day. Having spent time with many of Mandela's family members over the years, I speak to you today with humility, mindful of how much the man they loved means to so many. Those of us not fortunate enough to know Mandela well have come to understand the man through his legacy. The letters he wrote alone in his prison cell, the speeches he delivered to his people, and those incredible shirts that he sported. We've also come to know him through the photographs of a person who, even when confronting unimaginable cruelty and injustice, almost always had a smile on his face. For me, there's one photo in particular that stands out. On my wall and in my heart every day is an image of my mother and Mandela meeting in Cape Town in 1997. The photo was presented to me by the late Archbishop Desmond Tutu, whose friendship and inspiration were their own treasured gift. My wife and I had the honor of introducing our 4-month-old son to him back in 2019. But when I first looked at the photo, straight away what jumped out was the joy on my mother's face, the playfulness, cheekiness even, the pure delight to be in communion with another soul so committed to serving humanity. And then I looked at Mandela. Here was a man with the weight of the world on his shoulders, asked to heal his country from the wreckage of its past and transform it for the future. A man who had endured the very worst of humanity, vicious racism and state-sponsored brutality. A man who had lost 27 years with his children and family that he would never get back. 27 years. Yet in that photo and so many others, he is still beaming, still able to see the goodness in humanity, still buoyant with a beautiful spirit that lifted everyone around him. Not because he was blind to the ugliness, the injustices of the world, no, he saw them clearly. He had lived them, but because he knew we could overcome them. In our own time, a time of global uncertainty and division, when it's all too easy to look around and feel anger or despair, I've been inspired to go back to Mandela's writings for insight into how this could be, how he could experience so much darkness and always manage to find the light. There I found a few lines that stopped me in my tracks. In a letter from prison, he wrote, "I feel my heart pumping hope steadily to every part of my body, warming my blood and pepping up my spirits. I am convinced that floods of personal disaster can never drown a determined revolutionary. To a freedom fighter, hope is what a lifebelt is to a swimmer. A guarantee that one will keep afloat and free from danger. It moved me even more when I saw the date. August 1st, 1970. 7 years into Mandela's imprisonment, not even 1/3 of the way through. In those circumstances, how many of us would have lost hope and let our lifebelts slip away? How many of us would have been broken by a system designed to do exactly that? And let's be honest, how many of us are in danger of losing those lifebelts right now? How many of us feel battered, helpless in the face of the seemingly endless stream of disasters and devastation? I understand. This has been a painful year in a painful decade. We're living through a pandemic that continues to ravage communities in every corner of the globe. Climate change wreaking havoc on our planet, with the most vulnerable suffering most of all. The few weaponizing lies and disinformation at the expense of the many. And from the horrific war in Ukraine to the rolling back of constitutional rights here in the United States, we are witnessing a global assault on democracy and freedom, the cause of Mandela's life. According to Freedom House, our world has grown less free every year for more than a decade and a half. As so often happens in history, the consequences of decisions made by some of the most powerful people in some of the wealthiest countries are being felt even more deeply across the continent of Africa. The pandemic, the war, and inflation have left Africa mired in a fuel and food crisis, the likes of which we have not seen in decades. Worse still, this comes at a time when the Horn of Africa is enduring the longest drought it's faced in close to half a century. And what is happening in Africa is not an isolated event. The drought there is a reflection of extreme weather we are seeing across the globe. As we sit here today, our world is on fire, again. And these historic weather events are no longer historic. More and more, they are part of our daily lives. And this crisis will only grow worse unless our leaders lead. Unless the countries represented by the seats in this hallowed hall make the decisions, the daring, transformative decisions that our world needs to save humanity. These decisions may not fit with the agendas of every political party. They may invite resistance from powerful interests. But the right thing to do is not up for debate. And neither is the science. The only question is whether we will be brave enough and wise enough to do what is necessary. So yes, this is a pivotal moment. A moment where multiple converging crises have given way to an endless string of injustices. A moment where ordinary people around the world are experiencing extraordinary pain. And in this moment, we have a choice to make. We can grow apathetic, succumb to anger, or yield to despair, surrendering to the gravity of what we're up against. Or we can do what Mandela did, every single day inside that 7 by 9 foot prison cell on Robben Island, and every day outside of it too. We can find meaning and purpose in the struggle. We can wear our principles as armor. Heed the advice Mandela once gave his son to never give up the battle even in the darkest hour, and find hope where we have the courage to seek it. Since I first visited Africa at 13 years old, I've always found hope on the continent. In fact, for most of my life, it has been my lifeline, a place where I have found peace and healing time and time again. It's where I felt closest to my mother and sought solace after she died, and where I knew I had found a soulmate in my wife. And it's where so much of my work is why my work is based there. Because despite continued hardship, there are people across Africa who embody Mandela's spirit and ideals, building on the progress he helped make possible. I see it in the communities fighting to save the Okavango Delta, defying the odds to protect their home and its biodiversity from big oil companies. I see it in the young girls who are forced out of school and into marriage in northern Nigeria, speaking out today so others may get a fuller chance to thrive tomorrow. I see it in the young entrepreneurs I met in Johannesburg, using their energy and creativity to launch businesses that serve their communities. I see it in World Central Kitchen, a partner of the Archwell Foundation, and their volunteers in Ukraine and around the world, fighting food insecurity one meal at a time. I see it in the vulnerable children of Lesotho and Botswana, orphaned by HIV, striving for a better future, which we support through our organization, Centibali. I see it in the newest generation of activists for equality and justice, who are mobilizing people of all ages and races, all faiths and walks of life, to lace up their shoes and join the march. And I see it in the parents I meet around the world, as determined as Mandela was to give their children a better shot at a brighter future, to prioritize their own and their children's mental health and well-being, to reject old ideas and past prejudices, to heal from the past and build resilience for the present and future. Because they know the price of inaction will be paid by the next generation. In their strength and in their deeds, Mandela's legacy shines as brightly as ever. They are my lifebelt. I hope they can be yours too. Because right now, the water is rising all around us. In some places, quite literally. So it's more important than ever that we seek a purpose greater than ourselves and get to work. After all, Mandela was not only a man of conscience, he was a man of action. He organized millions, inspired billions, joined hands not only with those who loved him, but those who had once jailed him, to build a better future for all. What Mandela understood was that true legacy transcends one's own needs and the passage of time. It defies the moment. Its relevance never ceases. Legacy does not belong to the self. It belongs to those it impacts. That doesn't mean he was perfect. No, he was something better. He was human. As he wrote in his autobiography, I have made missteps along the way, but I have discovered the secret that after climbing a great hill, one only finds that there are many more hills to climb. I have taken a moment here to rest, to steal a view of the glorious vista that surrounds me, to look back on the distance I have come. But I can rest only for a moment, for with freedom comes responsibilities, and I dare not linger, for my long walk is not yet ended. It has been almost a decade now since Mandela's own walk on this earth finally reached its end. But what he taught us again and again is that it was never his walk alone. It was all of ours. It is all of ours. And what a beautiful gift, especially as a dad of 2 young children myself. The message that this world is meant to be shared. That the work of each generation is tied to those who came before and those who will come after us. That we have an obligation to give as much, if not more, than we take. And never shudder in the face of darkness, for hope is the fuel that courage requires. So on this Nelson Mandela International Day, as a new generation comes of age, a generation that did not witness Mandela's leadership for themselves, let's commit to remembering and celebrating his life and legacy every day, not just once a year. Let's talk with our children about what he stood for. Let's seek out what we have in common. Empower all people to reclaim our democracies and harness the light of Mandela's memory to illuminate the way forward. Because if we can summon our own courage just as he did, if we can see one another's humanity just as he did, a better day will truly be on the horizon. Thank you.
I thank the Duke of Sussex for his...
Well, you were watching Prince Harry, the Duke of Sussex, the keynote speaker at the UN celebration of International Mandela Day, talking there about his experience of Madiba, about how his mother's face lit up